This recording was produced by the Savanna Institute and funded by a grant from the USDA SARE program. You'll be hearing a conversation between aspiring silvopasturists Liz and Nate Brownlee of Nightfall Farm in southern Indiana and silvopasture expert Chris Gonzo of Worries Are Gone Farm in central Indiana. You can find more silvopasture resources at savannainstitute.org.
All right, so I am here with Chris Gonzo. And Chris, will you start us out by telling us about your farm?
Yeah, our farm name is Worries Are Gone Farm. We moved here in Owen County, Indiana in 2007 in July. So we've been here 10 years. And I was telling you earlier, it's kind of farm, we call it a farmstead, so that I define that term as kind of a mix between a homestead and a farm. So, but right now we are a little bit more focusing on the homesteading aspects, like feeding ourselves before we focus on feeding others. And a lot of our farm, we do the whole range of homestead production, from animals to fruit trees and vegetable gardens, but our focus in the future is, I think, going to be in fruit and nuts. That'll be kind of where we actually try and make a little bit of money. But it takes a long time to establish those things. So, like I say, right now we're really focusing on saving money by producing pretty much all of our own food right now, and waiting for the trees to come into full production before we start selling a lot more. So right now a lot of our sales are just friends and family and neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, but when we walked around the farm, we saw a ton of rootstock growing and a lot of things just coming into production at the first orchard. Yeah. So how many stems do you have in the ground out there, would you say?
At least 1,000.
Yeah,
at least 1,000 that are established.
Okay. And what are the main things you're aiming to grow in the fruit and nut categories out there?
Well, we really like our native fruits, pawpaws and persimmons, just because they're naturally adapted here. We don't have to worry about spraying fungicides and insecticides. We don't do any sort of spray on the farm. So we've tried doing a lot of plums, and that's one area where we're trying to find stuff where we don't have to spray, but we get a lot of black rot on all of our stone fruits. Mm-hmm. So that's cherries and plums, and basically just figured I'm almost ready to say we can't do plums, but I still have a little, I've heard that Auburn University has some plums that are naturally brown rot resistant and stuff like that. But so we want to grow stuff that we don't have to use chemicals on, and they're going to produce naturally, like healthy fruit. So we're focused on pawpaws, persimmons, and then our native nut trees are hazelnuts and pecans and black walnuts, but we're also interested in the whole spectrum of interesting things that we can grow. So there's heart nuts, which is mm-hmm. like a Japanese walnut, and different crosses. Like I showed you that hickon, the mm-hmm. cross between the hickory and pecan. I really like hickory nuts as well. So I feel like there's a lot of focus on fruits, but there's not a lot of organic fruit available. And then I don't feel like a whole lot of organic nuts at all available at farmers markets. So that's another reason why we're kind of going in that direction.
Neat. And then some of the fruit and nuts, it looks like, are specifically for your livestock. You showed me the pig paddocks where you've got pawpaw, and what else did you have out there?
Chestnuts and of course a lot of oaks. We try and maintain the oaks that are out there, and I've planted some oaks out there too. But they'll eat walnuts as well. Yeah, the pigs and the chickens are perfect homestead, farmstead animals because they can take care of any surplus that we have mm-hmm. on all that stuff. So that's pretty much one of the main reasons we have pigs at this point.
Yeah, and then you had the northern pecans in the cattle pasture, right?
Right.
And that was that combo. Tell me about that, because it wasn't for the cattle to eat necessarily. It was more a good combo for maintaining the trees. Is that right?
Right. So we grow the pecans there in one of our north pastures, mainly because it's a very wet site, and pecans adapted to those types of soils. But secondly, we like to have that shade spread out in all of our pastures, and we'd like trees that are going to be productive for us and our animals, to provide that shade, kind of a dual purpose, multi-benefit. So that's why we chose pecans there.
Yeah, neat.
The cows.
We have a beautiful place here.
Thank you.
I like the variation. You know, you've got a sort of mosaic here with your wetlands, and you've got, you know, sloping places, and you've got your forest land. So, what did this place look like 10 years ago?
So, yeah, believe it or not, so we have this is a 32-acre farm, and there were, I think, pretty much the whole farm was fenced with one fence, and the guy ran about 100 head of cattle without any sort of grazing, rotational grazing whatsoever. So it hit our woods pretty hard, and our woods are just starting to come back in terms of all those herbaceous perennials that were palatable to cows in the woods were basically gone. So we have a lot of pawpaw and spice bush in the understory of the woods, and that's fine because we like pawpaw, but we also liked some of the other like spring ephemerals and stuff too. So. And it removed a lot of the oaks that were in the understory because they couldn't come up with that grazing pressure. So when we came here, we still had half of our farm is woods, so we had a decent woodland that hadn't been timbered too hard, and we had the grazing, the pasture, and it wasn't too bad. There's a lot of diversity out there, decent amount of weeds, but also a decent stands of grass too. So, and then in our drainage areas and in areas that were less grazed, we had a lot of invasive species. So a lot of multiflora rose. I think someone had bought into the fence line idea that was being promulgated in the 70s. So we had that we've kind of gotten mostly under control, and Japanese honeysuckle was really rampant here, and so we've removed a lot of the fruiting vines on that, and we're still working on controlling the remnants of that. But that's it really. It's just an old cattle farm with a lot when we moved here with a lot of invasive species, but we have an area that has a lot of woodland in the surrounding ecosystem. So we've got a pretty healthy remnant natural communities population in the area. So it's nice when you remove those invasive species and stuff, you can get to see good stuff come back, and the wildlife is helping. As we've planted good stuff, they're passing along those seeds and whatnot. So
that's a beautiful story, and I think it's what it takes. I think repeopling the landscape is a big part of it. Yeah. Having that set of eyes and ears and hearts here that want to bring this place back to life. Each place back to life.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I have some more questions for you. I haven't asked you yet. So tell me about what all livestock you guys raise here on the farm.
So we raise cattle. We have 15 acres that we graze, and cattle is pretty much the dominant species out there. We've had sheep, but we're not currently running sheep right now. So our cows came from started with an organic dairy with Jersey, and then we've been just breeding in grass-fed genetics. We have a real nice farm nearby called the farm connection. It used to be called the Swiss connection in Clay City, Indiana, and they've been working on their grass-fed genetics for a long time. They produce cheeses and stuff, so we've been getting bulls from them and breeding that in, and so we have the cows, and then we also have a small flock of geese, and we have pilgrim geese. And then in the woods, we're raising pigs. Right now we just have 2 feeder pigs for our family, and then we're starting to experiment with heritage breeds, and so we're keeping a boar and a sow for the first time this year, and the sow's an American guinea hog, and our boar is going to be a Ossabaw Island hog, but her first litter is going to be with large black, so hopefully that works out okay. And then other than that, we just have chickens, and we raise 1 or 2 batches of broilers each year, and we have the obligatory, farm dogs. We have 1 on the day shift and 2 on the night shift, and that's it. That's it right now.
Beautiful. It's a good spread. Okay, so why you touched on this a little bit, but I want to follow up. Why did you decide to start the silvopasture combo, start establishing more trees in your pasture, and because you have, and tell us what trees you're grazing around right now?
Yeah. We like, our family likes to eat meat, so that's and we had the 15 acres of pasture, and it seems like cows are the most efficient at keeping the pasture in good shape, and in terms of managing with low input fences, and we like cows. We make dairy products for our own family use, and also use that to feed the pigs as well. But that's why we chose cows. But I think both my wife and I like, there are trade-offs when you live a lifestyle with animals, as I'm sure you know. You're especially when you have milk cows, because they're milked twice a day, 12 hours apart. So it's a tremendous commitment, and you have bulls that maybe want to jump fences, and all sorts of fun things that you get into. So it's it's something that we like, and we're doing, but I guess what I'm saying is I like trees more. So I would be happy if my pastures were all planted with trees, really, but we also want to have that meat, and we want to be able to raise it ourselves and know the quality of it, and stuff like that. So so we want to get there. I'd be happy. Yeah, I don't think I should take it any further.
That's good. That's priceless. Okay, so let's see. When did you plant the first? You have some trees that are existing in your pasture,
right? And
then you've planted some in. What all do you have in the cattle pastures in particular?
So we had a good little stand of black walnut trees that were previously planted, and I would guess that they're 35 or 40 years old. They've been producing. Maybe they're older than that, actually, because they've been producing real good ever since we've been on the farm. And there's a row of persimmons along the creek in the pasture, but we have been planting oaks, few oaks, and pecans and chestnuts and apples. So
neat.
Yeah.
It's neat to see the diversity you have there and how good your trees look. And how are you protecting the trees that you're planting in your pasture?
Yeah, so we have cows, so the fences are pretty much just designed around them. And the option that we go with is just 4 T-posts about 3 foot apart in a square around the stem, and sometimes a little bit tighter than that. Maybe at the smallest, like 1.5 foot off the stem, and then we use field fence. Usually, I put it flipped upside down so that the larger holes are at the bottom, and sometimes that's our only protection. Other times we use welded wire, and it's a little bit taller. Like we have some cages that are like a 5 foot span of welded wire, also around the T-post. But pretty much with cows, I feel like that's about one of our pretty much only options. I mean, we could maybe use cattle panels, but then that would be a little bit more rugged, but probably a little bit more expensive too. Because I'm not sure if you could get away with doing 3 posts or what. And I haven't thought about doing a board system setup, but I haven't done that. So.
Yeah, I think it seems like it's working, right? I mean,
yeah.
You've got the apple trees. How old are those out there?
They were planted in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Because how tall are they now?
Yeah, they just came into production this year, and I think they were a couple. I forget what the caliper size was, but yeah, they're 15 feet now, at least.
Neat.
Yeah, producing just a handful of fruit on each one, but yeah, doing well.
They're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. What do you think when you're managing your silvopasture areas? Are you managing more for the health of the trees, more for the health of the forage, or what's your guiding principle there?
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, more for the grasses maybe, but yeah, it's hard for us to have that kind of specificity, because we're not planted so thick that we can say like, okay, we want the cows to take it down real low so that I don't know, it gives the trees a chance to get into the grass, get into their root systems. But yeah, so I think we're managing more for the grass, and if we see the grass kind of going up, we did mulch those trees initially, and if I see too much grass right around the base of the tree, we'll go in and actually weed around the trees. Try not to, and don't have time to do
right.
as much as we could. But
okay, great. Let's see here.
yeah, so managing for the trees or for the grass and the cows more than the trees. The trees kind of have to survive on their own, really.
And to that end, if you planted in rows at random, some of each, what's your kind of planting setup?
Yeah, for the pecans, we planted in the wet areas. So, and then when we do chestnuts this year, we're going to plant up just to cover the whole hillside, and we want to, have good pollination for the trees. So I'll plant in one area. For the apples, that was kind of a thought-out row along the pond there, and then to leave some more planting areas between them and the black walnuts. So it's kind of a mix match.
Okay, cool. And is there anything so far that you do differently looking back in terms of your layout or your establishment?
I don't think so. No, not for this setup. If it was a flat farm and an old ag field or something, then I would totally do stuff differently.
Yeah.
But
I'll ask you about that later. Cool. You mentioned that.
One thing I'll just say
Go
real
for
quick
it,
is
yeah.
that you're planting pecans. Something you got to think about is at some point you might want to have a shaker come down, and be able to have access to pull in a shaker and hook it up to your tree, and so you can't. You gotta be able to do
Space,
that.
right?
Yeah. The space. You gotta have access and.
Yeah, whereas the species that you're growing here, it's hand pick up, or hand pick off the tree, which is handy.
Yeah, hopefully we'll shake some pecans
Really?
down there.
Okay.
Yeah. But,
Cool.
yeah. And some of the apples you might want to do that too, but
I didn't know if you'd be able to shake there because you said you picked those wet places. So do you think it's dry enough
yeah.
during the time of year where you need it to be dry?
Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Talk to me about sort of your balance of time and financial investment, because you've said you're a lot of the trees in places where you're not grazing, you're not protecting, you're letting nature help select for trees, and so where do you balance that question, right? Like, do you have the time to wait for trees to grow and you do the bare root plantings and as opposed to buying a $50 tree, something like that?
So, yeah. What do you mean? Can you rephrase that?
I can. Yes. If you're thinking about how you've established your silvopasture here, is it more important to have, for you guys, has it been more important to have invest more money up front and get a quicker return, trees growing faster, or is it worth it to put more trees in the ground and be patient?
Well, we didn't have the option to plant.
Yeah.
We didn't have the resources to plant. For example, last year, instead of 15 bare root pecans that were 2-year-old seedlings, to do grafted of the same size and quality grafted trees, that would be. The difference is. We got the bundle for $30 from the state nursery, and each tree would be about $30 grafted. So there's huge trade-offs. So what we're investing in, and it's still expensive, is those 4 T-posts and the wire. The wire's not too expensive, but T-posts are kind of expensive, and then our time in doing the initial groundwork, removing sod, and flipping it over and broad forking the planting area, and then getting the trees in the ground. So that's our big investment. The tree itself isn't too expensive, but yeah. And then the issue is that we have to wait a few years to graft, and then we have to wait even longer for it to grow up and start providing an income. But yeah, it's a long wait for nut trees for sure.
What
15 years.
When did you learn to graft trees? How did you go about that?
3 years ago, I had gone to or kind of been involved with the Indiana Fruit and Nut Growers Association for more years than that, like maybe 5 years. And I think I went to a grafting demonstration in March of. They do, I think, a couple grafting workshops each year, and I went to one and didn't really learn at that time, and I think tried it. I think it was in the summer, but 3 years ago, I kind of made more of an effort to learn, and it was mainly maybe a little bit from that knowledge, but then just from watching a lot of YouTube videos, really, and doing it a lot, and it's really not hard to do at all. If you spend a half day trying it, anybody can learn how to do it. It's not at all hard.
Cool.
So 3 years ago is when I started with persimmons doing bark grafts, and I think I did a couple whip and tongues, and then last year, and then each year since, I've just done more and more. So pretty much the month of like April and May, and even into a little bit June, I'm grafting every free second I have.
I want to come intern here. That would be exciting. We can make a commercial for your internship program. Okay, cool. Let's see. I might have just a couple questions left. What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about adding silvopasture to their farm, whether they're starting from scratch or they're already grazing, want to add some trees, or start putting animals into their woods, because you have both options. What advice would you give to people?
Yeah, ma'am. Maybe it's because of my day job, but I would work with a forester. I'm trying to think of something that might be like different from what other people might say.
Yeah.
But I think foresters have a good understanding of the species that would do well in your woods, and that maybe you, if you're looking to convert woods, that you could keep and that would do well, or that would be adapted to planting into sites. But yeah, it's each option is so totally different, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, most people just do one. They, thin woods and create their silvopasture that way, or they establish trees in old ag fields. But you've got both. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think with establishing trees, I guess a piece of general advice is like, the more I forget what the aphorism is, but it's like the more footsteps you have around that tree, the closer you can be to it, the more success it's going to have. So try and work a lot on areas where I'm already going to be, and like I was showing you, kind of the mowed path around where we're trying to establish a lot of trees, and we work off of those things. It's just as much as you can be around the tree, I think they do better. Just with you'll see when they're starting to have issues with rabbits or weed pressure or whatever. But yeah, I don't recommend planting stuff you can't get to frequently. I've done that a lot in places that are hard to get to on our farm, and tried to plant trees there and just lose them in the weeds, and ends up being a waste of time. You always think you can do more than you can, and when it's not the growing season, or the growing season hasn't started yet. But yeah.
Cool. That's good advice. You mentioned YouTube as a resource. Are there any other resources that have been especially helpful as you're thinking about, for growing fruit and nut trees, either in general or within the silvopasture system?
Yeah, for silvopasture, maybe not as much, but for growing fruit trees in general, Facebook is really good. I don't use Facebook a lot for, I think, what a lot of people think of for like Facebook. Like, I don't know, I guess people think of like, I don't know, baby pictures and things like that, or vacation photos and stuff. I don't use it for a lot for that, but I'm a member of like a lot of different groups. Like there's specific groups for castanea, like the chestnut growers, and for jujubes, and persimmons have their own group, and pawpaw fanatics is a group. So there are people in those groups that are amazing sources of knowledge. And I really get a lot of benefit from Facebook, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's great.
In those things, yeah. And then, I'm friends with a lot of nursery folks like that Darren Bender Beauregard at Brambleberry Farm, who you mentioned earlier. He's a good friend of mine. And, we went to the Pawpaw Conference last year, and he's a great resource. So, I think those are a couple sources. Books as well.
Those things that they make out of paper and you have to like open.
So books were like when we first moved to our farm, and even like when I was still living in Indianapolis, when we had just come back from Asia, and that was all I used was books. But I hardly ever read any books anymore. But I read a lot of books like 10 years ago, like Gene Logsdon books, and you know him?
I do.
Yeah. So stuff like his, and a little bit of Winterberry and stuff like that, but more like the how-to stuff like Gene Logsdon does. I read a lot of stuff like that.
Neat. Very good. Well, this has been super useful. Chris, do you have any questions for me? Do you need anything else you want to say? Maybe that's the next bit.
No.
Perfect. Well, I think we knocked it out of the park.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.